Hello, my name is Timothy Reed. I'm from the Spanish National Distance Education University in Madrid in Spain. I would like to start off by saying thank you to Dara Tafa for giving me the opportunity to give this presentation, and today I'd briefly like to talk to you about mobile massive and open online language learning for displaced people. So let's start off talking very briefly about language MOOCs. I assume you know what a MOOC is, a massive open online course. Started in 2012, although the earlier MOOCs were in fact go back before that, 2008 perhaps, and it combines open and social learning. So it's an effective way of bringing a large group of people together for studying and interacting online. When you think about how you can apply this to languages, then we can really think about two different kinds of MOOCs that might be appropriate here. Firstly, CLIL MOOCs, which are content and language integrated learning. Now, these are courses which specifically do not focus on the language themselves, but focus on another area of knowledge, for example, science, medicine, mathematics, whatever, but they're undertaken in the target language, the language a student wants to improve. And really, to be able to do these sorts of courses, you need to have a solid B2 level according to the Common European Framework of Reference, otherwise you're going to find it difficult. For students at a lower level, then you have language MOOCs or LMOOCs, and the difference between language MOOCs and CLIL MOOCs is that you have language as the content and also the vehicle. So you're learning a language, but you're also using that language to communicate in the online forums. And typical sorts of problems we have in these courses are overcoming the teaching ratio. So for example, on a professional English B2 language MOOC we did back in 2012, there were 35,000 students and there were 6 teachers. So obviously trying to get meaningful interaction and supporting the students can be tricky, but it's not impossible, as I'll mention a bit later on. The context for this presentation is the Moonlight project, which is an Erasmus Plus K203 project we started back in 2017. It's finishing this year. And the idea is to use MOOCs to help displaced people, that's refugees and migrants, with their social inclusion. So we're focusing on their language skills and also their entrepreneurial abilities as well. So the question is, are standard language MOOCs appropriate for refugees? Now, there are an awful lot of language MOOCs around. I saw some data from Coursera the other day that claimed to have reached I think it was 11,000 refugees who've been through their courses. And they are claiming that they're effective, but our experience from working with this social group is that, and it's not just about this group, this is a comment about everybody. I mean, we all have certain levels of different digital competence, digital literacy, social cultural needs and expectations. So the way we interact and learn online is different. And if we're talking about people who have come from the MENA area, Middle East, North Africa, then sometimes that can be different from what we'd expect in Europe and maybe in the US, and the way these courses are prepared. Let me get back a bit to talk about mobile deployment. So why have we gone to the trouble of focusing on mobile deployment for this particular, the MOOCs we're doing? I think the data speaks for itself. I mean, if you look at, if you take some time to follow the link on this slide and go to UCOM. This is data about the UK, but I mean it's the same for most European countries, and you can see that essentially a third of all people there only use smartphones to connect to internet, only a third. And if you include tablet use there, we're talking 77%, so that's the majority of people. So if your courses don't deploy well on mobile devices, you've got a problem. I've also got some data for Iran, which I found online, that there's a 53% SIM take-up rate, although I'm not sure what that implies about how many people are actually using smartphones and tablets as their only device. If anybody's got that information, I would love to have it. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's think about displaced people. I mean, we're talking about people in specific complex and fluid circumstances, and you know, they're not necessarily keen on using online learning, which is not surprising really, but it's quite often the only option they really have. So this is something that we need to address. So the questions therefore come up: can you actually learn from mobile devices if you're on the road, at holding camps, etc.? And if this were the case, hypothetically speaking, what would be needed for this to happen? I've got a picture the good old Swiss Army knife at the left of the screen here, and I've done this because I think I've said, and I'm not the only one who said this in the literature, that you can really think of a mobile device, a smartphone, as a digital Swiss Army knife, because it really does have a set of different functions that can help make learning possible. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be easy, but it can be better than nothing. Now, if you actually want to get a bit of a feel for refugees' attitudes and sometimes their resistance to online learning, then I would highly recommend this the THES, the Times Higher Education supplement article that they published a while ago about I think it was Syrian refugees and the resistance they've got. I'm not going to get into this whole resistance issue. I mean, you can understand it. It's difficult. In not the best of circumstances, chaotic, noisy. You can't be on your own for very long. And really what they want is the peace and quiet of being in a language classroom or for whatever subject they might wanting to be studied. And that if you're going to try and get them to progress in online learning, then you need to have the relevant support and scaffolding that's actually taking place in these courses. And also, it's quite important that they're not just learning for learning's sake. At the end of a particular course, they need to have some kind of recognition and certification. And I was pleased to see that the European Commission has just released a pilot of certifying refugees' qualifications, so that when they move between countries, they can actually carry on their studies. I don't know much about that at the moment, but I think it's a wonderful way to go. MALMOOCs. If you search for the term and the authors that published it online, you'll be able to find the article we published about this. So essentially, when we're talking about MALMOOCs, what do we mean? Well, we're talking about an LMOOC which can be accessed from a mobile device. I mean, typically we're talking about a mobile browser, so it can be Chrome or it can be Safari or whatever, but we're thinking more about the browser than the mobile app, because there are some mobile apps available, but they don't always work as you'd expect them to. And for open platforms like OpenEdX, for example, then there isn't actually one you can just use and it directly works. At least I haven't found one that works well. Okay, so we're talking about the mobile device as a course client. We've also thinking about the way we can use learning activities, making use of the sensors we have in the phone. I mean, we can have audio and video being recorded, uploaded to the Internet Archive or YouTube or something, and that forming part of peer-to-peer language production activities in the course. And then we can also finally think about incorporating apps to actually, if you like, extend the learning away from the course and to keep the student thinking and working in the target language. So when we started this project, Moonlight, the first thing we did was to contact I think it was over 20 refugee and migrant support groups in and around Madrid, and we had them in for a seminar because they didn't know an awful lot about the possibilities for MOOCs. And I think we've had 2 face-to-face sessions with them, and during this time we've talked to them, but we've also been listening very carefully, and we've been getting them to actually collaborate with us in the preparation of 2 Spanish language MOOCs, A1, A2, and at the same time we've been using this as an opportunity to identify certain criteria which really need to be present in these courses to help the students' progress. And from this, we've actually built a rubric which we're publishing at the moment. And if you like, it defines these criteria and really helps you think about the way they should be specified and incorporated into a given MOOC or online course. I mean, you've got the criteria there on the screen. I'm not going to go into any detail about them. We've got the pedagogic linguistics, social culture aspects, the technology, and the institutionalization. And if you want to know any more about this, feel free to contact us. Okay, so here's our platform. The course is on our OpenEdX MOOC platform. OpenEdX isn't perhaps the best platform available. I'm not a big fan, but it's free and it works, so you can't really complain. On the left-hand side of the screen, you've got the desktop experience, and on the right, the mobile experience. I mean, the mobile experience works, so I'm not really going to complain, but let's just leave it there, shall we? And obviously, when you actually go into the dynamics of the course and thinking about the learning activities, bearing in mind that the refugees aren't always going to have access to a decent bandwidth and peace and quiet to be able to work, then it needs to be possible for them to download the materials and try and do as much of the activities offline at the same time. This is obviously limited in a way by the platform, but you can work around it and things can be done. So let me just talk about some of our learning experiences and some of the if you like, some of the pedagogic approaches we've had to use in this course and other learning experiences. As I mentioned before, there are difficulties in us all connecting together online and working and learning together. I mean, it sounds great. It sounds like a nice panacea. We're going to connect together. There's no geographical temporal boundaries. Isn't that just wonderful? Well, unfortunately not. There are difficulties with this. I mean, a lot of people, I mean, a certain percentage of the refugees we're working with have very basic digital literacy abilities, so they need to learn how to learn before they can learn, if you understand me. And I've got a couple of examples which I think can be quite illustrative, and I think we don't have to be talking about MOOCs here. If we go back to about maybe 10-15 years ago when we were doing CMC, we were doing some language learning, some English learning experiments with a mixed group of Spanish students, American students and Japanese students, and actually this was really quite a painful experience getting this to work, because I mean, I suppose since I'm European, I'm biased, and I see the Spanish as being, if you like, middle of the road in terms of sociability, openness and knowing when to shut up. And the difficulty was actually trying to control the dynamics of this group. For example, the Americans just wouldn't stop talking and the Japanese wouldn't start talking. So trying to structure the learning activities, the production activities, if you like, can be tricky. Another interesting example, a colleague of mine was running an online course for some female students in Palestine. They were using Skype for this. And the interesting thing was that they were all connected together in a group. They had their cameras activated and they were chatting quite nicely. But when he came along and connected, obviously as a white, male, European, the first thing they did was to switch their cameras off. And the second thing they did was to keep quiet. So it's actually very challenging for him to actually be able to engage with these students and get them to start working in the target language. And one way we found around this is the idea of using educational proxies. The idea is not to have a direct teaching contact with the students, the teacher, rather finding someone from the same social cultural group and use them as the teacher. So you teach the teacher who teaches the students. And we haven't tried this too much with the first language MOOC. We got a second one coming up in a while, and we'll be trying this out now. The other thing which is quite important is the idea of what we call e-leading students. This has been published, so you'll be able to find more information about this on time. I mean, as I said before, the difficulty is the ratio. If you've got maybe one teacher and you've got 500, 1,000 students, how can you have a meaningful interrelation with them? Now, what we've done with this is to target students who are very proactive and working very well at the beginning, and if you like, select them for becoming e-leading students, and you get them to interact with the students on your behalf. It's similar to the educational proxies, but it's done in a different way, if you like, because it's very rewarding for them, and at the same time it's good for their students, because for the whole set of students, if you've got a large number of e-leading students, maybe you can highlight 10, then you're multiplying by 10 the interaction you can have with the group. Now, obviously, bear in mind that when you're talking about a MOOC, you've got a heterogeneous student collection, so it's not a question of the one-armed, one-eyed man leading the blind. You can find people who do have good linguistic skills to be able to be tutoring and training other people in the course. And with carefully developed rubrics for the peer-to-peer and collaborative activities, it is possible to produce quality output in the target language. Another important issue is this whole question of scaffolding and support. And when you're thinking about talking or producing in the target language, it's very important to be using open educational resources, because that facilitates the 5 R's, which once again you can find this documented online. The idea you're potentiating the ability to retain, reuse, revise, remix and redistribute the content. So we always make sure that all of our content goes on using the Creative Commons licenses, and we're constantly encouraging students to work with them, to extend them and to build them into their own activities. And with the peer-to-peer activities, this is in fact possible. Okay, so as I said before, we've got 2 Spanish MOOCs. One's coming to an end now, the next one's starting in a few weeks' time. So this is Spanish for immediate needs. It's A1 with some A2. Each course is 6 weeks, and we're over. It said 1900. That was the time I did the slide, but I think we're over, well over 2,200 students now. And the content is refugee friendly, and it's designed to include people from the same social group in the videos and in the activities. And the experience is going very well. We're publishing like crazy at the moment, so in a few months' time, hopefully, you'll have more information about this. Now, it's called Immediate Needs because it's for displaced people who are in Spain or are thinking of coming to Spain, and the sorts of problems they're going to have. You know, the sorts of things, what do you need to do in your daily life, what happens if you have to go to the doctor, and a whole range of activities which have been specially developed for them. Okay, so I'm aware of the time now, so I'm going to begin to come to an end here. It's been a very brief presentation. I hope I've been able to, at least motivate the need for using mobile devices for language MOOCs and online learning in general. I read on an article online a little while ago that said that we should be designing for mobile, and I completely and absolutely agree with that. Rather than developing our course, for example, let's imagine you're using Moodle for your students, and Moodle's a great platform. Start from the beginning about thinking about how this will deploy on a mobile device. What can you do with your materials to make them roll out well in terms of the types of fonts you've got, the size of the videos, etc., etc. The second comment here is a little tongue-in-cheek when I'm saying the platform is dead, long live the platform. The last data I saw from the uptake of the big LMS, the learning management systems in the US and Canada, because it's unfortunately the only place where they publish the data, I haven't got any data from anywhere else, the number of licenses that people are actually buying on platforms like Canvas, Brightspace, Blackboard, and even Moodle, you don't buy the licenses, but nonetheless are actually going down. And why is that the case? And I'd argue that really the need for an LMS is not as strong as it was maybe 5 years ago, because where are my students? I want to be where my students are, and I want to be there to scaffold their learning process, and making my students come to my university web portal, connect to the portal, jump through to the LMS, from the LMS jump to the course down to the forums to the threads, and has my teacher answered my message? Oh, no he hasn't. Well, I'll come back tomorrow. I mean, that's not an ideal scenario. If my students are on the social networks, then that's where I need to be as well. So I think we're seeing a blurring of the contact we have with students. I teach a mobile learning subject on a master's course, and I do the whole thing from WhatsApp. WhatsApp's not an ideal platform because for a lot of reasons, I'm not going to get into it now, but it can be done, and the students love it. They absolutely love it. And why? Because it's in their face all the time. I mean, it's on their phone. They haven't got to be connecting, and the interaction is fresh and it's dynamic, and it works really well. Okay, so as I said before, finishing now, design for mobility, that's fundamental, but scaffold for diversity. Long live social diversity. This is really, really great. It's wonderful because when we have online courses, especially if we're thinking about social inclusion, it's not just explicit social inclusion in the sense that I put a course together that will have people from, I don't know, from China, some people from the US, some people from Europe, or from other people from the Middle East. It's just that since the course is open and it's free, you get people from these different backgrounds anyway. So, for example, on the Spanish MOOCs I was talking about before, the cool thing here is that you've got MENA people, Middle East, North Africa, but you've also got people from the East. You've got Russians, and you've got some Polish people as well connecting in, and what do they have in common? They want to learn Spanish, and so this is called implicit social inclusion. So this is really think is very encouraging for us editors. And I think finally, I'm going to finish now because time's up. I mean, you're more than welcome to email me if you've got any comments, criticisms, or anything else on that address. So you can find information about our publications and our projects on ResearchGate and on Google Scholar. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much indeed.